Everyone, I am Punya Aggarwal, ACCA affiliate and one of the admins of Being ACCA. And in this video, I'll be briefly summarizing the AA September-December 2023 examiner's report. This is the latest examiner report that we have, and this is available on your ACCA portal, so you can download it from there. You can watch our video how to download it on our Instagram page. So let's begin. It is a 18-pager report which is made by the examiner, and it is very, very important for you to read it before you go to your exam so that you understand where are the common areas that students make mistakes in and what are the areas that you should focus on more. If you're giving the double A paper, like it is your reset and you made mistakes, you flunked your December attempt, then this video is really very helpful for you. So let's begin. I won't be going line by line, of course, because this is like an 18 pager and we'll take like hours to complete it. But then I have marked few pointers and liners which are very, very important for you to understand and learn. So let's begin. Firstly, we'll be doing section A, which has approximately 5 questions, and then we'll be going to section B, in which we'll be discussing all of the important areas. So let's begin. As I said, there are section A and section B here. Let's start with the section A question number 1. So this is an example of a case scenario which contains your 5 questions. So let's begin. It is 1st July 2005. You are an audit supervisor of tea company. You're reviewing the audit of scraper company for the year ended 30th April 2005. Now, as I have highlighted over here, the similar thing you can do so that you understand that, okay, first today is this date and our end date is this. So you know that the dates are important in audit. So the audit of trade receivables and prepayments was performed by audit assistant : the audit planning document required that a positive trade receivable confirmation circularization be performed. The total value of the receivables is your 2.5 million. So let's begin. If you know what is positive, positive receivables confirmation, here it is only the positive confirmation only says as customers whether they, if they agree or they don't agree, we take both of them with the balance which is stated. However, if it is a negative confirmation, they'll only disagree to it. They'll not, if they only disagree to it, they'll only tell if they disagree. If they agree, they won't tell it. If it is like a negative trade receivable confirmation, negative confirmation, right? So let's begin. The confirmation letters were sent out to 10 largest customers, totaling to $409,000, together with 30 other balances, which selected using statistical. So 10 largest and 30 other balances were there. After analyzing the responses, the working papers were prepared. So let's see. Okay, so as we said, there are 10 large customers, total number of accounts 10, total amount was this, amount was confirmed itna, then total of the balances confirmed, we confirmed itna balance, and the difference arised is itna. Then other customers were 253 and their balances were as below. Now let's read one by one. The largest customers. Now, identified that stale company replied stating the balance was itna, okay, and that a payment of 8,640 was made to scraper. So they are saying we have already made a payment of this amount. The scraper's company's accounting records show that the balance outstanding was itna. So now there's a difference. Like according to us, the balance is itna, but they're saying they have already made a payment of itna, right? So first is this. Second is other customers from here. Following investigation, Colin discovered invoicing errors in 3 of the accounts. So we have invoicing errors which had been selected using statistical sampling. The errors resulted in overstatement of the amount by itna. Then we have the third thing, which is prepayment. So included in prepayments, advertising cost of itna. The finance director advised Colin that the company started using the services of a new advertising company during the year and signed an annual contract on 1st of February. So our year ends on 30th of April. So we signed it before our year end, right? Okay, now let's see the first question. Indicate by clicking on the relevant boxes in the table below whether each of the following statements applies a positive receivable confirmation, negative receivable confirmation, or both. Now, as I explained, positive is when customer will agree or disagree. However, a negative confirmation is only when the customer are disagreeing to it. Right, so let's read this. Provides audit evidence to satisfy the objective of existence. So here both confirmations can provide us the evidence, the objective of testing evidence. So here it will be both, right? Then the next one will be cannot be used as a sole substantive procedure unless the population consists of a large number of small homogeneous balances. So it would be negative confirmation, because we cannot completely rely upon only disagreeing customers. We cannot completely, because here they're saying cannot be used as sole substantive procedure. So a negative confirmation can never be solely used for the substantive procedures that we are using, right? So cannot be used for the sole substantive procedures unless the population consists of a large number of small homogeneous balances. Then the customer is required to reply indicating whether they agree or disagree with the balance included in the request is your positive. This is the definition of your positive confirmation. So first is both, second is negative, third is positive. So let's see if our answers. So they also give you the answer over here, right? So first statement is both, which is correct. Second is negative, third is positive. Right here, they've also given you the explanation. So reading this explanation is very important, right? Next question, let's move to next question. Okay, let's hide the answer. Which of the following action should Wash have taken on initial receipt of the stale company? So now stale company will go above. We'll read it again. Here they're saying that they already have paid this amount. So we have to check about this amount, right? So now how can we check? What actions on the initial receipt? This is again very important. Initial receipt is very important word over here. Firstly, inspect pre-year end invoices and goods dispatch note for evidence of an order of itna. So of course this will be correctly, because this will be used to reconcile, right? This can be because we are inspecting our pre-year end invoices and goods, which is GDNs, for evidence of an order of itna, right? Then inspect correspondence with stale company for evidence of disputed invoices. Here we are not able to gauge, because this is a test which can be performed, but this will not be an initial test. We are focusing mainly on the initial receipt, right? So inspect correspondence with stale company for evidence of disputed invoices and discuss with the manager. This will be later stage where we'll be discussing it, right? Agree the receipt of 406 for the, this is the initial thing. Like if you'll straight away go to your bank and see if you have received an amount of 8640 from the company, because they're stating that they made a payment of this. So you'll just go to your bank and you'll check it. So according to me, it should be 1 and 3. 1 and 3 is yeah, it is B only. Okay, it is B, right? So they again have given you the explanation to this. Let's move forward with the third question now. Identify by clicking on the relevant boxes whether each of the following are suitable alternative procedures to confirm the year-end balances in the respective 5 customers who did not confirm. So there were 5 customers who did not confirm to us, right? So let's see what can be the substantive procedures for them. Okay. Inspect post-year-end invoices and goods dispatched notes for each customer to confirm the amount recorded in the ledger. So here, looking at the invoices and GDNs after the year-end will not allow the year-end balances to be confirmed. Of course, we cannot confirm it from the post-year-end invoices, right? So that is, it is a no. Then talking about the next one, review the age receivables listing at the date of the audit. At the date of the audit is an important word, to confirm post-year cash receipts from each customer and then agree to the bank balance. This is actually correct, because then age receivable will tell us that this was the balance before and this is the balance now from the year-end cash balances, right? So this will be yes. Allow the review the allowance for receivables to ensure that the balance due from these customers are included. Allowances is not related to our the receivables, right? Allowance is different, so it will be a big no. Again, you can read the explanation from here and you get an answer. Based on an error discovered in the statistical sampling of other customers, which of the following amounts nearest to dollar would be estimated total error in the population of the trade receivables? Okay, so let's calculate this. Let's calculate. We're talking about other customers over here. Right. So this is the table which is given to us. Now, what we will be doing is, we'll be taking the differences. This is the difference amount, right? So I'll do the calculation over here. This is the difference amount, right? We will be dividing this amount with the total amount over here, the total balances which we have confirmed, right? Which we confirmed out of the sampling was itna. And then we'll be multiplying it by the total amount, which will be 1,741,000. So what did we do? We took the difference of the other customers from here. We divided it by the number of the total balances that we confirmed by our sampling, and then we divided it by the total amount which was there, right? So out of 253, we only sampled 30, right? So this will come out to be, just a minute, 58308. So let's see if our answer, we get an answer over here or not. 58, yeah, C. This is the correct answer. C is the correct answer, and here is the estimate. This is what I did, right? So here they have also given you why option A, option B, option D is not correct. So you can also check this out, right? Okay, let's move forward with the fifth one, which is the last question for section A. Which of the following procedures should be carried out to determine whether the prepayment in relation to the advertising cost is underrated? So we're talking about the underrated costs over here, right? Now, let's read the first one. Compare the prepayment to the prior year and investigate any differences. So here, how can we gauge that the payment is underrated? We can only see a difference. We can only see a variance over here that, okay, it was 100 before, now it is 200. This is only we can gauge, right? But here, we cannot see if this is understated or overstated, right? So first is not the answer. Then review the signed contracts of details of the services provided and confirm that scraper will receive future economic benefits as a result of the contract. Again, here we're not taking about the understatement of it. Here we're only seeing about the what rights do we have in relation to the asset. Will we receive any future economic benefits from here? What are the results of the contract? So again, this is not the correct answer. Inspect the cash and bank ledger for the evidence of amount paid to the advertising agreed to sign contract. So here we're only checking its evidence. We're only checking the amount over here, that have we given it to the bank say debit hua hai nahi hua hai. We are only checking that. So this is also not correct. This will be correct. Why this will be correct? Inspect the signed contract and confirm the commencement date and recalculate the contract. So when we are recalculating, we'll actually get to know if it is understated or overstated, right? Confirming the period, because here we'll be confirming our period. If you see, the answer is 4 only, right? You can see you can check out the explanations. Okay, now let's move forward to our very important area, which is section B. The first question that you got was relating to a Knight Electronics company. The first question was about the audit, risk and planning. This was a 30 marker question, very important, very easy, nothing to worry majorly about. So the first question that you got, let's read the first question. Briefly explain how each of the following sources of information, so you got like a list of sources of information over here, will be used by H company to gain an understanding of K company at the planning stage. So you have a planning stage over here. We're only talking about the planning stage over here, right? Now, one thing I will be referencing ahead as well. Always read the question very, very, very carefully. When you have read the question over here, you will be also getting to know that there's a note. I'm sorry. Just a minute. Yeah. So there is also a note given over here. You do not need to refer to the scenario to answer this question. This means this is a purely knowledge based question. You do not have to refer to the case study to get the marks. You can simply, whatever you have learned the answers, because there are few questions in audit that you have that are knowledge based and that can be learned. So this is one of them. You do not have to refer to the case study to understand, or maybe to form your answers from here. You just have to see the source of information and how you can write just down that how can you gain the understanding. This will also come ahead where we are discussing in detail. Okay, now let's read what the examiner is saying. Knowledge requirements can sometimes have an opening statement reference to an international ISA. So of course, whenever you're writing anything, any knowledge based questions, it is always better that you refer it to our ISR, it is always better for the presentation point of view also. But I suggest students that even if you do not know the ISRs, it is completely okay, but do not write wrong ISRs, right? First point is this, which the examiner is saying. Second point is identify whether an understanding of the scenario is required to attempt the question. Where the knowledge requirement is not linked to scenario, a note is included for the confirmation of the same. See, this is a thing that I discussed over here. They are saying that you have gotten a note over here and you have to have an understanding whether you have to refer to the case scenario or not, or is it like a knowledge based requirement. So it was a knowledge based requirement because they clearly stated over here, right? So that was another very important part of over here. Next is for a 5 marker knowledge requirement such as this, candidate should aim to provide a well explained point for each of the 5 terms included within the table. So you just cannot state like one line, you have to explain your answers to get like a full 1 mark. I have seen students who just like write one line and they're not explaining why in audit is very, very, very important, right? Another 2 aspects of this here in relation to the case scenario is credit was awarded for the prior year's financial statement. So you have like 5 things over here. The first part is prior year audited financial statement. So how can you gain an understanding of this here is for gaining an understanding of the company's financial performance and position and to take preliminary analytical review. So you can use these things to gain an understanding of the company's performance, to judge the performance, position, and the analytical review you can perform. Similarly, for the budgets, for the management accounting, you can use it for the going concern issue, risk identification, analytical review. I am hopeful that you know this knowledge base and you were able to answer this. Now, a red flag which I saw, which the examiner saw, basically it was disappointing that many candidates confuse the prior year report managed to management with prior year audit report. So explain that they were looking for modifications report. So here you have to be very careful that they confuse the prior year report to management. So this was a prior year report to the management and not to the auditor. There's a very much difference between what we communicate to the management and what we communicate to the auditor, right? So you have to understand a difference is there between what we communicate to management and to the auditor, right? So here, as they are saying that the candidates were confused between the prior year report to management with prior year audit report, and they explained it that their modifications were required. We don't require any modifications over here. We are looking how can they improve our auditors understanding, right? For board minutes, credit what was awarded for identification of key issues occurring during the year. To gain 1 mark, this point needed to be expanded to also cover how those charged with governance had addressed these issues, and this would be needed to assess whether audit risk is increased. Right. So basically, it is a knowledge-based question, and you have to basically they're just saying that you have to be very careful in what you are writing. Reading the question is very, very important. Plus, you have to give a proper explanation of whatever you are writing. So this was a very easy 5 marks. Many students got like really good marks over here, but you have to be very careful of these things. So now let's move forward to your audit risks. So the question asked you 8 audit risk over here. Let's move forward. Firstly, let's discuss about the mark allocation. First is if you have identified the audit risk, for example, if it is regarding the revenue, if it is regarding the NCA, property, plant and equipment, regarding the loan, you will be getting half a mark. Now, explanation of that. See, I have seen students who just write the audit risk and do not explain how is it an audit risk and how it will affect our financial statements. So explanation of audit risk will also fetch you half a mark, and then you have to the response that you write will fetch you 1 mark. Now, good exam technique is critical with the exam-based requirement such as this. So this is a scenario-based requirement. You cannot just learn the audit risk and go to your exam and just write them down, because I've seen so many students that they actually learn the audit risk from their notes or from the examiner's notes or from their tutor's notes, and they simply write it down in the exam and they get a 0, because it is a scenario based requirement and you will be getting completely different scenario in your examination, right? The scenario will typically contain more than the number of the risk required. So it is a good thing for you. If they asked you 8 auditors, there will be at least 10 to 12 risks in the question. So you have to gauge what are the 8 risks that you are most confident in writing, right? Now let's discuss what are the steps that we can follow to write a good audit risk, right? The first step is to identify the factors which will give rise to an audit risk. This is very, very important. What are the factors which will give rise to my audit risk? For example, if there was a fraud, so the fraud will give rise to an audit risk. I identified the factor, right? This information could be found in the scenario. Of course, this will be found in your scenario. Highlight function, as this provides a visual aid. Again, highlighting is very important. I have also highlighted every major area in this audit report as well. So similarly, you can do in your question as well. Having looked at the whole scenario and highlighted relevant points, candidate should pick their 8 strongest points, which I just said that you will be having approximately 10 to 12 audit risks in the question, and you can pick your 8 auditors which you are most confident in, right? Now, very, very risky area. Let's see. Candidates often use the copy and paste function when drafting their answers. So here, this is not wrong. Okay, you can copy and paste from the scenario, from the question to your answer for the identification of the risk. However, what is the risk over here is care should be taken to ensure the risk is actually identified. So what happens is, for example, if it is like a long paragraph, a four-liner paragraph, now I saw that there was a risk over here. Okay, now what the candidate does is they copy whole of this and write their to an answer. This is a very bad practice. Only the line which indicates an auditor should be copied from the scenario and put down to your answer, right? Okay. For example, so this is an example which is stating this. You can read this. Now, this is again half a mark which is given to you. Now, again, an important thing, again, red flag. Hence, a strong knowledge of relevant accounting standard is required to fully understand the audit risk and therefore a relevant auditor response. Now, as I have mentioned numerous times, that it is important for you people to have a firm grip over your IFRSs and your ISs. Because see, if for example, there was an issue in relation to your revenue in the question. So till the time that you are not aware of the standards that governs the revenue, which is IFRS 15, how are you going to state the correct treatment of that revenue, which should have been taken by the company, but they did not take it, right? So that is the reason that strong knowledge of the relevant accounting standard is required. So this is again very important, right? Okay, so this was the first step in which we have identified the factors which led to an audit risk. So we have identified our half marks which led to the audit risk, right? Now, explanation. Having identified the risk factor, the next step is to explain. So this is the next step. To do this, candidates need a specific area of the financial statement. So here you can do 3 things. Now, how can you know? See, explanation cannot be in form of you just writing that this will be affected. You have to talk about either the assertions that this will lead to a cutoff error, or this will lead to a disclosure error, or this will lead to a valuation error. For example, I'll give you an example. There's a very common audit risk, which is about your split between current liability and non-current liability when you're taken a loan. So if the company has taken a bank loan, there's a risk that the loan has not been split between current liabilities and non-current liabilities. So why do we split this? To ensure that there's a proper disclosure. So this is your assertion, right? You have to write this to ensure proper disclosure. Then only we'll be understanding, okay, this is the explanation to the risk. If you only write that there should be a split between current liabilities and the non-current liabilities, it won't be counted as the explanation. You are just stating the risk. You haven't explained it how it is a risk, right? So it is an assertion. Similarly, when you write overstatement, understatement, or misstatement, that also forms part of your explanation to the risk. For example, when you write that due to this, our profits can be overstated, our revenue can be overstated, our NCA can be overstated or understated or misstated, whatever. So you have to write about this. So there's an option. Either you write the assertions, either you write about the overstatement, understatement, or misstatement, or you give reference to your risks that are there. So there can be detection risk, there can be control risk, there can be inherent risk. So detection risk arises when there's a new client, or maybe when we are transferring our data from one software to another, or when we are shifting our some of the functions to a third party company. For example, payroll is shifted to a third party, so there can be a detection risk in that case. So you have to reference it either to a assertion. Please keep these 3 points in your mind. These are very, very important, that either a assertion should be there, or a reference to the overstatement, understatement, or misstatement is there, or a reference to any type of these three risks should be there. Right now, very, very important thing which I want to again discuss is, now if for example you're writing about the overstatement, understatement, now you're not sure, or you just like you're very lazy and you write misstated. Misstated will not be awarded until and unless, if the balance should be clear. So here you can see, misstated will only be awarded if it is clear that the balance could either be overstated or understated. So there can be scenario where there can be overstatement or understatement, right? So there you can write the misstatement. But if there it is clear from the scenario that the profits will be overstated, you have to write overstated. If it is clear from the scenario that the profits will be the profits will be understated, you have to write that the profits will be understated. You cannot just get away writing misstated. That will award you 0 marks. Okay, so this paragraph is very, 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 very important. Now, another thing. For example, if the risk should have been described in terms of an understated balance, as I just mentioned, so this is just an example of the misstated that I discussed, then no credit would be awarded if the candidates refer to the misstated balance, right? Of course, if I know it is an understatement, you have to write understatement and not misstated. Candidates cannot hedge their bets by providing both the options. So you cannot just hedge it, right? You just not cannot provide an option to the examiner that okay, you decide. No, you have to give a clear cut answer to the examiner, right? The explanation of the risk must also state the specific area of financial statements affected, impacted. Of course, for example, in respect of the issue related to change in useful lives, only noting that non-current asset or asset should be overstated would be awarded, would not be awarded credit. So you can not just, you have to write about the financial statements or the area that will be impacted. So you just cannot write about the NCA. You have to write that the property, plant, and equipment will be overstated. As a whole, it would be overstated because this is a PPE forms a part of your balance sheet, right? So you have to write about the property, plant, and equipment, and not just writing the non-current asset will be overstated, right? So very, very important areas. Now, second and third point is about your auditor's response. So we discussed about writing about, finding out what the risk was. Then we discussed how can we explain the risk in a better format. And then now we'll be coming to the auditor's response. Third point is auditor's response. Okay, care should be taken to ensure that response is one an auditor would make and not a management response. Definitely, I have seen so many students that they write this is an auditor's response. You cannot state it from the management point of view. You have to state what the auditor will be doing in this case. If he finds out that there has not been a split between current and non-current liabilities, what will auditor do? You have to write that. What will management make? You're not concerned with the management. You're not the management. You are the auditor over here, right? So in this session, candidates often provide management responses for the audit risk relating to the increased receivable collection period, such as recruit a new credit controller. So if you're recruiting a new credit controller, you are acting as a management. I cannot just recruit somebody, right? I'm an auditor. How will I recruit somebody from in the company, right? Candidates are advised to take a moment to read the responses and ensure that they are recommending will help the auditor to form a conclusion on the identified audit risk, right? Okay. Next. Additionally, some candidates give general statements of the required accounting treatment. For example, for the inventory risk, it was common to see complete net realizable NRV testing rather than how the auditor would test whether the recent cost of the inventory was above or below NRV. So you cannot just write the complete the NRV. I am not, auditor is not the one who will complete the NRV. That is the management will be, testing that. I am just saying, I will just see that whether the recent cost of the inventory was above or below, right? The general statement approach indicates a lack of practice in tackling the difficult or different risk and responses. Candidates often suggest professional skepticism. Now, this is again one, I'm sorry, yeah. This is another very important thing that I notice in some of the answer script that I personally check. That is simply right, maintain professional skepticism. What do you mean by maintain professional skepticism? This is like a very basic thing that you have gotten, right? For a whole range of auditors, and while valid on its own, is not a suitable audit response for 1 mark. This is because increasing skepticism not on its own help the auditor gain suitable audit evidence over the identified audit risk. For sure, right? You can not just state that I have to maintain professional skepticism and I'm done. No, that will only give you half a mark. You have to explain it. How will my professional skepticism will improve the auditor's response, or will improve my understanding of the risk, right? So you have to be very careful with this as well. Now, the auditor responses do not have to be detailed procedures. Rather, it is an approach the team will take. So it is not a procedure that I will be taking. It is just an approach that I will be doing this, right? So there's a difference between procedures and responses, right? Care must be taken to ensure that the approach suggested actually addresses the risk, identifies and contain the sufficient detail. So again, same thing, like I mentioned over here, that this is very generic. So you have to relate it to the risk that you're writing about the professional skepticism, and then that will fetch you 1 mark. A response of discuss with management will not gain any credit, as the candidates need to be very clear exactly what are they asking the management about. Again, the same thing I have discussed with my students as well, that discuss with management. Do not, when you're writing discuss with management, what am I discussing with management and why am I discussing that with management is important. Now, for the receivable risk, responses which simply stated discuss with management the appropriateness of any allowances were only stated awarded half a mark, as they also need to review the age receivables report for the long outstanding balances, because we are talking about the receivable risk. So when you read the question, you'll understand this point better, right? Okay. Now, these are some of the important questions which they have stated. I have also stated in my essentials, AA essential questions video. So these are important questions which you should do. These are past paper questions which are important. Now, so this was about your audit risk. I hope that you understood where students make major mistakes in, right? And how can we write our answers in a better format. Now let's read part number 3, which was about the auditor substantive procedures in relation to the revenue. Now, many candidates fail to score well in this type of requirement because their procedures are vague or too brief. Test must be sufficiently detailed, noting clearly which source document should be used and for what. Again, very important that you do not have to write. That is what they are saying, that you do not have to write general substantive procedures. You have to explain them, and they, which source document I will be using and for what reason I will be using the source document, right? Candidates who focus on casting the breakdown of sales, agreeing to the financial statements, recalculating sales invoices, analytical, these are all the general procedures that we usually use, but they have to be in relation to your case study. You can, of course, use these wordings, but of course, they have to be in relation to your case study. We'll read them again. Comparisons can be made between total or monthly revenue and the prior year or budget, or a breakdown of key product lines or customers can be compared to the prior year. As these are again very generic ones. Now, a proof in total where the prior year is adjusted for any known fluctuations in the year. Again, these are also very basic. So these are all the common substantive procedures that we usually use. Now, very important paragraph. Let's read. Where the question requirement is for revenue, then no credit will be awarded for any receivable procedures. Of course, there are many students who get confused between revenue and receivables. These are two complete different things. Receivables are the amount that you will receive. Revenue is the amount that you have already received. These are your sales. There's a difference between your sales and your receivables, right? In this session, it was common to see candidates stray into receivables testing, such as review the after-date cash receipts, considering whether an allowance for receivables was necessary. So we are not talking about the receivables here. We're talking about the revenue here, right? Revenue, your sales, your turnover over here, right? Also, where detailed testing were provided rather than testing to or from the list of sales invoices. Incorrect answers focus on receivable ledgers, details of customer balances, and GDNs, which is not relevant to your revenue, right? When generating substantive procedures, it is important to ensure the tests have sufficient detail and are clear. Again, sufficient detail and are also clear. For example, perform a cutoff test. So I am not, if I just write this, perform a cutoff test, for which what I'm for without describing what the actual test is and what document should be used will not gain any marks. Like what test am I performing? Why am I performing? What are the source documents that I'll be using? On what I am performing the cutoff test. So without all of these reasonings, I will not be getting any marks. It is important to stress that the source document is GDN before and after the year end, and these need to be agreed to the sales invoices. So basically, just they're giving you the explanation for these, right? Again, very, very, very important paragraph, very important line. Okay. Now I have seen, I'll just explain you. I have seen students that they, whatever the substantive procedure is, towards the end, they will always write that ensure that the correct disclosures are in accordance to the whatever the substantive procedure said. For example, here we talked about the revenue part, right? So at the end of the substantive procedures, for example, it was a 5 marker. Four they will write the normal ones, and the fifth substantive procedure will be writing review the disclosures and they're in accordance to the standards. Guys, do you know, are there any disclosures? Do we require any disclosures in relation to revenue? Please think twice before you actually write. So not for all the things, for example, profit, for example, revenue, for example, other things as well. So they, not all the things require disclosures. Only the standards which are there, they require disclosures. For example, if you're dealing in IS 38, it requires disclosure. If you're dealing in provisions, it requires disclosures. So also many candidates suggested reviewing disclosure of revenue. However, this would not gain any credit as revenue, along with most profit or loss accounting items, does not require disclosure. So that will be a straightaway wrong statement. So please be careful when you're writing any of these things, because this will create a major impact in your answer script, right? Again, there was a substantive procedures for a payroll fraud. So now it was not only about the payroll, it was about payroll fraud. So you have to write your answers in accordance to this. Reading the question is again very, very important. Therefore, an application of, see, here again, as I said, application of the knowledge to the scenario is required. So you have to use the scenario from the question to understand that, okay, you cannot just write the generic substantive procedures. You have to relate it to the case study, right? Now, many candidates did not score well on this requirement. Incorrect answers focused on listing generic substantive procedures for audit payroll expense rather than the fraud. As I explained, you have to write about the fraud, not about the payroll, right? Or they focus on the knowledge area of auditor's responsibilities related to fraud, or just related it to the fraud, or like if it is was payroll and fraud, they either they related only to the payroll, or they only related it to the fraud, not payroll fraud. So that is another big mistake that people do. Other incorrect answers focus on control management should adopt to prevent further frauds. Again, we are not management, we are auditors, right? This is the wrong focus as it does not consider what the auditor should do. Also, some candidates provide vague comments such as increased substandard testing without any details of what the increased testing would be. Candidates who suggested increased professionalism did not gain any credit, as this is not an audit procedure but an audit response. This is an audit response, guys. This is so increasing professional skepticism is a part of your audit response, not a procedure. Procedure is a procedure includes your testing, your analytical procedures, all of those things, and not your professional skepticism. The information available in the scenario used the information. So here what the students who gained marks did, use the information available in the scenario, were able to score sufficient number of points. Candidates should be prepared for unusual requirements and take common sense. Again, this was clearly an unusual requirement, because this is somebody, only people who read the question nicely will be able to answer this question better, because this asked about payroll fraud and not individually about fraud or payroll, right? So this completes your question number 1. I hope that you were able to understand this part. Let's move to question number 2, which was about your internal controls. Again, a very, very important question which comes in the exam. Again, this is the same thing that I pointed out earlier as well. Here you have gotten a knowledge-based question, and they have clearly written that you do not need to relate it to the scenario. So in the case you don't have to relate it to the scenario, they will be giving you a note, right? So this was a deficiency question, knowledge requirement question was there. It is important that candidates understand exactly what question is asking. Very important. When you read the question, you'll be understanding it, especially for knowledge questions when they should be aiming to score full marks. It is also important that candidates note that they do not need to use the scenario. Same thing, right? So describe what is there, which means that you have to explain in detail. Very important. You have to see the complexity and the frequency of the deficiencies. Now, 4 was in capital, so you only have to write 4 and not more than that, right? These are few things, very small things, but form a major part of your syllabus. It is imperative that future candidates ensure that they devote adequate time to learning the knowledge areas of the syllabus as well as practicing the knowledge questions. So again, a very helpful tip from the examiner. Again, these are important questions which you can do. About the next question, which was about the deficiencies, which is again a very important part of your syllabus and one of the most important topics. Now let's see how can we first let's discuss about the marks, the bifurcation of the marks. Firstly, when we identify the deficiencies, just like we identify the audit risk, we get half a mark. For the explanation, we get half a mark, and then for the recommendation, again 1 mark. Similar is the case with audit risk as well, right? So now let's see what all steps we have to follow to write good deficiencies and recommendations. Firstly, the first step is tackling a deficiency question is to read the scenario in full. So firstly, you have to read the case study in full. Candidates should reread it and drafting their answers as they go along. So firstly, read it once. You can even highlight it once when you're reading it, then you can reread it again, then pick up the pointers from the question, then start drafting your answer. Do not be daunted by the length of the scenario, be methodical and keep reading the requirement to stay focused. So again, so there can be a scenario where the case study is very lengthy and students get to, tend to get very tensed about it, but you do not have to be tense. You just have to go with the flow, read it, whatever deficiencies you're able to find, go to your answer and write it down. Simple, right? It is important to record what actual deficiency from the scenario is, right? What actually the deficiency is from the scenario and not from the whatever you have learned before. You do not have to learn anything, right? Now, a classic example is this one. In this session, some candidates stated that the company manufactures goods 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, this is not a deficiency. Do you find a deficiency over here that if the company is manufacturing goods 24 hours 7, it is not a deficiency, right? So you have to be very careful when you are copy and pasting from the question and see what you're copy and pasting from the question. And it is actually, is it like a deficiency or you're just copy and pasting? That's all, right? So when copy and pasting facts in the scenario, care must be taken to identify a relevant deficiency because this was not a deficiency, right? Now, so first one was identifying the relevant deficiency from the question. Second step is explanation of the implication. So now you have to write the reason, like the explanation of the implication, the what will happen because of that deficiency. For example, if I have a warehouse, if I have a company's warehouse, now the deficiency is that there's nobody looking after it, right? There's no CCTV camera, there's no guard, there's no check-in check-out process, nothing is there. The door is open, you can, anyone could come into the warehouse, can take the stuff and go out. So there can be a lot of theft issues. So this is a deficiency in my system. Now what would be the implication of this? Like if there's no camera, if there's no security guard, if there's no biometric system for the clock in clock out, what would happen? You have to write that. So the deficiency is that I do not have cameras and all of these. What will happen because of that? I don't have camera. You have to write that there can be theft, there can be loss of goods, there can be inventory loss, etc. So these are the implication of the deficiencies that you have in your warehouse, right? So this is an example that I gave. So now let's read this example as well. For example, a valid explanation for the deficiency: the count is overseen by the warehouse supervisor. So the deficiency is that they do not see the count. The warehouse supervisor does not see the count. So half a mark you get because you got the correct deficiency would have been the warehouse supervisor is not independent and so many concealed errors of potential fraud. So this is the reason. Answer which stated the supervisor is not independent would have gained credit as it does not explain lack of independence. You have to talk about the independence also. So your answer cannot be half written. You have to write your answers in a full manner. The explanation needs to be specific to each deficiency, as it is not sufficient to state this result in fraud or error, as all deficiency. Obviously, for every deficiency, you cannot straight away write this will lead to fraud or error. If here I would have written it will lead to fraud and error, what fraud and error? You have to dive deep into the deficiency and write your the explanation of the implication as per the deficiency that you have identified, right? Then the third part is, of course, the control recommendations, what we can do. So, for example, in this case, what I give the example, you can write that, the company, the management can set up CCTV cameras. They can have a guard who's, 24 hours 7 there, and somebody's looking over him also through the camera. Cameras are working. You can also write that, we can have a biometric system which have a fingerprint lock in it, and only few people of the management of the warehouse department are allowed to go into the warehouse, right? So all of these are recommendations that we can give you to maybe remove that deficiency out of your system, right? The next part of the requirement for the candidates is to determine control recommendations. Descriptions of recommendations are detailed enough. You have to make sure that it is detailed enough as well. And recommendations when be actions, it should not be objectives that they should do this. It should be actions, like I said, that they can have cameras, they can have safety guards, etc. So these are actions which we can take. Recommendations are well described. Number one, clearly addressed to the specific scenario. Second, and are practical suggestions. So these what I've said in the example are practical. You cannot write in practical situations in your answers, because think of it like that, you're actually solving a problem. You're not solving a question, so you're solving a problem. So write it in that way. For the deficiency related to the movements of goods, yeah, this is a very, very common question, very, very common deficiency that is there, that while we are counting the inventory, there's continuously in and movement out of the warehouse, right? Many candidates incorrectly recommend that the company should stop the overall movement of the goods. Why? How can I stop the overall movement of the goods? My goods are coming in, coming out. How can I stop that for just for the counting part of it? This is a wrong thing, right? Despite the scenario clearly stating that movement would need to continue for the operational reasons. So the question is actually stating the same, that you cannot stop the operations, right? You cannot stop the movement. So how can you recommend that they should stop when they're actually saying in the question that for the operational reasons we cannot do that? So you have to make your recommendations accordingly, that maybe we can count the inventories when it is the lowest period, when the goods and in and out of the movement is very less during the night time maybe. So that can be a recommendation which is practical also. For the deficiency of no clear division of responsibility within the team, the recommendation of responsibility should be allocated within the team would not gain any credit. Like, how should we do it? Kaise kare is the question. How, why explanation is very, very important in audit questions, right? So you have to write that there should be a separate team member for this thing, there should be a separate team member for this thing. So there should be a segregation of duty. So that will get you 1 mark, right? I hope this was helpful for you. Then these are some of the important questions from your same, the internal controls topic. Last question is about the substantive procedures, the audit report, etc. Again, very, very important. So this is the time management that they have given, which I also suggest students that you should, for example, if it is like a 2 marker, you have to multiply it by 1 point, and whatever time you're getting, you have to devote that much of time to this question. So similarly, if it is like a 12 marker, you just have to multiply it by 1 point and you get your time. So time management in audit is very, very, very important. Okay. Now, substantive procedures includes tailoring procedures to specific requirements of the question. Too often, candidates have learned a set of standard tests and are then produced for each requirement without considering for the relevance. So again, this is a very common practice which happens because substantive procedures is one area where students are very confused, very tense, and do not understand. So they learn it. It is a big note for us. Rote learning is not the solution for auditing. Auditing the only solution is that you actually understand the concepts, understand the case study, write it according to the case study. That is what they are also saying. Audit procedures must be sufficiently detailed, noting clearly which source document, number one, should be used. For example, tests such as review disclosures would only score half a mark. Okay, I'm reviewing disclosures, but why am I doing that? which source document shall I refer to, right? To score a full mark, the procedure should go on to say in accordance with accounting standard, relevant legislation. For example, if we are writing the disclosures in according to IS 38, we can state this IS. We can state IS 37. So whatever the standards are very important. Rote learning is a big no. Standards are a big yes. You have to understand and learn them. Secondly, rote learning is not a solution. Thirdly, your answer should be wholesome. They should not be of a one line. You're just not stating facts. You have to explain your answers as well, right? Now, next question was about your, substantive procedures. One thing I want to refer to here is that they are asking about the trade receivables. Point number one. Now, point number two, they are clearly stating that you have to write about the existence and valuation. Iske alawa, if you write about disclosures, if you write about cutoff, all of these won't work. They have given you specific assertions which are existence and valuation, and you have to only write according to that, right? So the question was related to two assertions, existence and valuation. Any procedures not related to these assertions, such as review disclosures, will not gain credit, because we are not asking that. If it would have not been, mentioned in the question about the existence and valuation, of course you could have written about the disclosures as well. That assertion would work. But here they've stating that existence and valuation, right? Similarly, for example, in this case, some candidates included review after date cash receipts and could only get half a mark. So what review? Why should I review? How should I review? So follow these receipts through period. So you have to complete your answer. Completion of the answer is very, very, very important. Then trade receivables, valid analytical procedures such as comparing the trade receivables to prior year, significant. Again, these are these are generic ones. Right, candidates who compare the balance to the prior year to identify any significant differences only gave half a mark, as the process of comparing current to prior year only identifies the difference. To gain the other half mark, significant differences need to be investigated and discussed with the management. So if you only write like compare this to the prior year, so what, okay, I'm comparing, now what should I do? You have to discuss or investigate it further, also discuss with the management, right? So that's that. Then talking about, some candidates had not read the scenario carefully, as it clearly stated that a trade receivable confirmation circularization would not be performed. So there's no credit was awarded to the procedure. So you have to relate it to the case scenario. You have to read the case scenario very, very, very carefully, right? So this is the takeaway from here. Then we have our substantive procedures in relation to the legal claim. Again, this is again a very generic, nothing else, nothing as such specific I could find in this particular thing. But for example, whether it should be recognized, or if so, at what amount. Procedures can be designed to address these issues using the information from the scenario to the detail. So you have to talk about the scenario. That is what the examiner is again and again suggesting, that please refer to the scenario. Okay. Now, again, the bank loan was asked over here. Nothing as such was there. Now, talking about the last part, last question, which was about your CAM paragraph, the contents of the CAM paragraph. This is again a kind of a knowledge-based question, not exactly related to your case study. So all the scenario related to the legal claim, knowledge marks could easily be obtained without reference to the scenario. So as I said, this was a knowledge-based question, right? So candidates should focus on 3 to 4 points that the engagement partner would consider, such as level of risk. So basically your knowledge base, you just have to learn, you have to write it, and you'll be good to go. So your knowledge base are actually very important for your paper, because these do come in your paper, right? So content, what is the issue, why is the issue, how is this? Again, explanation is very important on audit. Whatever, see, the major thing that we focus in audit is the question why, how, what. So you have to always see that whatever you are writing in your, if you have written statement A, B, C, right? You have to explain it. You have to see the reason why. Why am I doing this? And write that in your answer. Why, how, what, these questions and audit are very, very, very important. So I hope that through this examiner report analysis, you were able to, identify your mistakes, understand the mistakes of students better, perform in your questions better. I'll be coming up with other explanations of the audit report as well, exam report as well. And if you found this helpful, you can comment down below, you can share it with your friends, and I'll be most happy to help you.